I want you to imagine walking into a courtroom, but not just any courtroom.
Right. Definitely not your standard traffic court.
No, I mean a courtroom right at the very end of human history. I want you to really, really picture this with me for a second. The atmosphere in this room is, well, it's just suffocatingly heavy.
Oh, the tension would be unbelievable.
Exactly. It is thick with this terrifying electric anticipation because the final gavel is literally about to drop.
Yeah.
Every single piece of evidence from human history has been painstakingly presented. Every hidden motive you ever harbored, every secret, whispered choice you ever made.
The things nobody else saw.
Right. Every forgotten moment you thought absolutely no one on earth knew about. It is all being brought directly into this blazing, inescapable light.
There is literally nowhere to hide in this scenario.
Nowhere. There are no clever legal loopholes left to exploit. There are no high-priced defense lawyers to object to the evidence. And there are absolutely no plea deals left on the table.
It's just you and the record.
Just you and the record. And as the silence in that courtroom just sort of stretches on, a massive lingering question is asked of everyone present. The question is, who shall be able to stand?
Wow. Yeah, that is the ultimate question of endurance, isn't it? And it's not a rhetorical question either. It demands a real biological, psychological, and spiritual answer.
It does. And the twist here, the thing that makes this such an intense investigation, is that the answer isn't what any of us would naturally expect.
Not at all.
Because if you're standing in that final courtroom, survival is not about who is physically the strongest.
Yeah.
It's not about who has, the most geopolitical influence or the best offshore bank account.
Or the most resources stockpiled.
Exactly. When the world completely collapses, when the economic and social structures we rely on just crumble into dust, and when sheer paralyzing fear is the natural human reaction, who has something inside them strong enough to actually survive?
Who can remain standing when the gravity of the entire world is literally trying to crush them to the floor? Well, if you look closely at the evidence, if you truly examine the psychological profile of the survivors in this apocalyptic scenario, the paper trail does not point to people who never struggled.
Really?
Yeah. It doesn't point to people who lived these insulated, highly privileged lives and somehow magically avoided pain. The secret weapon, hidden deep in the text, the very thing that allows God's people to stand in the absolute darkest moment in history, is incredibly joy.
Welcome to Cracked Wide Open, where Bible mysteries aren't just explained, they're investigated like cold cases. Each episode, we analyze the sermons of Pastor Ivor Myers, reopening the text, following the clues, and uncover truths that have been hiding in plain sight.
I am so ready to get into this one.
I am thrilled you are joining us for this investigation. Today, we are reopening the case file on Pastor Myers' groundbreaking series, The 9 Essentials of the Time of Trouble.
It's such a dense, fascinating series.
It really is. Evidence we pulled from Pastor Myers' notes leads us somewhere completely counterintuitive.
Yeah, it definitely throws you for a loop at first.
It leads to essential number 2, which is joy.
And investigating joy as a survival mechanism, that requires a complete and total paradigm shift on our part.
How so?
Because it goes against literally every single instinct of human self-preservation.
It absolutely does. And the mission of this investigation today is to figure out how something like happiness or joy could possibly be classified as a tactical survival tool in a time of unprecedented global crisis.
Which is a tall order.
It is. Because if we're being totally honest with each other right now, joy sounds incredibly fragile. It sounds like, a luxury for a sunny afternoon at the park, not a shield for an active war zone.
Right, it feels too soft for what's coming.
So let's open the case file. We have to start by looking at the core of the crisis itself. In Pastor Myers' notes, the prime piece of evidence is Revelation chapter 6, verse 17.
Okay, let's look at the text.
The text reads, "For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand?"
I want to pause right there, actually. What exactly are we dealing with when it asks who is able?
That word able is really where we need to focus our magnifying glass first. Because, in English, able just sounds like having permission or basic capacity, like, am I able to go to the store?
Right, just a simple ability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if we trace that specific word back to the original Greek text of Revelation, able is rooted in the concept of dunamai.
Dunamai.
Yes. And that word connects directly to raw power, explosive ability, and sheer undeniable strength. It's actually where we get the English word dynamite.
Oh, wow. Dynamite. That completely changes the tone of the question.
It does. So the text isn't just asking who will be comfortable during this time, or, who will find a safe, well-stocked underground bunker to hide out in.
It is asking a question of intense spiritual endurance. Who has the internal fortitude, the absolute unyielding capacity to face the full weight of this global crisis and not mentally or spiritually break?
Okay, wait, I need to push back on this a little bit.
For it?
Because when I hear words like strength or power or especially dynamite, my mind instantly goes to physical attributes.
Sure, that's natural.
If we are talking about a global crisis, a literal time of trouble, we naturally think of warriors, right? We think of tactical gear and survival skills.
We think of action movie heroes.
Exactly. And Pastor Myers brings up the examples of Samson and David's mighty men from the Old Testament. Now, when I hear the name Samson, I automatically picture sheer, unparalleled physical dominance.
The guy who carried city gates on his shoulders.
Yes. I'm picturing a guy tearing a lion apart with his bare hands, or men who could hold off entire enemy armies with just a sword. That is our human default definition of the strength required to survive a cataclysm.
It is our human default, yeah, because we are biological creatures. We naturally equate survival with physical dominance or intellectual superiority. If a threat is physical, we instantly want a physical defense.
Right, a bigger wall, a stronger lock.
Exactly. But Pastor Myers points out a crucial paradigm-shifting twist in the evidence here. God's people at the end of time aren't going to need Samson's physical muscles.
They aren't.
No. The crisis they're facing isn't going to be solved by punching harder or running faster or lifting heavier objects. They're going to need Samson's level of spiritual strength.
Spiritual strength.
Yes. They need the ability to accomplish what human ability, human psychology, and human willpower alone absolutely cannot accomplish.
Okay, so we are tracking a totally different kind of power source here. If it's not physical muscle, and it's not just sheer mental grit, where does it actually come from?
Let's look at the paper trail for that.
Yeah, in the notes here we have Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10. The Apostle Paul writes, "Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might."
Notice the specific phrasing Paul uses there.
Right. He does not say, dig deep into your own emotional reserves.
No.
He doesn't say, manifest your own reality, find your inner warrior, and just pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Precisely. Paul explicitly locates the power source outside of the human self. It is, quote, in the Lord and in the power of his might.
So it's not ours to begin with.
Exactly. It is a foreign strength that gets imported into the human experience. And we can corroborate this with another piece of evidence from the same author, actually.
What's the verse?
If you cross-reference Ephesians chapter 3, verse 16, Paul talks about being strengthened, quote, with might by his Spirit in the inner man.
Okay, so the Holy Spirit is the true, verifiable source of this strength.
Yes, it is an internal reinforcement provided by an external divine source.
Which brings us directly to the evidence board. If the Holy Spirit is the one providing this spiritual muscle, this bunamai, what does that actually look like in a human life?
What's the output, right?
Right. What is the tangible, observable evidence of the Spirit's work? And we find that list of evidence in Galatians chapter 5, verse 22.
The famous list.
Yes, these are the 9 pieces of evidence. The fruit produced by the Spirit says love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance.
There it is. The 9 essentials Pastor Myers outlines. And sitting right there, immediately following love at number 2 on the list, is our prime suspect for today's investigation.
Joy.
Joy.
All right, I have to stop you. I am putting on my skeptical detective hat here for a second. Joy. Really, because if you are listening to this and I am prepping you for a massive Category 5 hurricane-like storm of the century, my instructions to you are going to be intensely practical and incredibly serious.
Of course.
I'm going to tell you to board up your windows, stockpile drinking water, secure the perimeter of your house, and just hunker down.
Right, you're giving survival protocols.
Exactly. I am absolutely not going to look at you as the sky turns black, the sirens are blaring, and the wind is literally ripping the roof off the house across the street and say, hey, just be joyful.
It sounds completely absurd when you frame it like that.
It does. Joy seems like this fragile, fleeting emotion. It feels like completely the wrong suspect for a survival scenario. Frankly, if the world is ending, joy feels inappropriate. It feels almost delusional.
It absolutely feels contradictory, but only if you are operating under the standard modern human definition of joy.
What do you mean?
Well, we tend to use the words joy and happiness completely interchangeably, right?
Mhm.
But psychologically and biblically, they are radically different elements.
Okay, break that down for me.
Happiness is entirely circumstantial.
Hmm.
It is an emotional response to external stimuli.
Hmm.
It happens when things go right in your environment. You get a promotion at work, you feel happy. Your favorite sports team wins the championship, you feel happy.
Right, it's a reaction to good news.
Exactly. But the very moment those circumstances turn hostile, the exact second the boss fires you or the medical diagnosis is about you,
Right.
human happiness evaporates instantly.
It's just gone.
It cannot survive a crisis because it is built entirely on the circumstances of the crisis.
So human happiness is basically fragile by design.
Exactly. It's a house built on sand. So if the biblical text is presenting joy as a primary tool for surviving the ultimate historical crisis, we have to deduce that biblical joy is an entirely different substance than human happiness.
It has to be.
Right. It must have a different chemical makeup, so to speak, to withstand that kind of pressure.
That is a massive distinction. We are talking about a completely different psychological and spiritual element altogether. And what's wild is that the Bible actually goes out of its way to deliberately create this contradiction, to force us to see the difference.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a fascinating piece of evidence in Isaiah chapter 61, verse 3. This is a prophetic profile of what the Messiah came to do. Let me read it straight from the case file. It says, "He came to appoint unto them that mourn in Zion, to give unto them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness."
What's so fascinating here is the deliberate, almost shocking juxtaposition of the imagery Isaiah uses. The text directly, explicitly connects joy with mourning.
Yeah, which makes no sense to our modern ears.
None at all. Now, to understand the weight of this, you really have to understand ancient Near Eastern mourning rituals. When someone in that culture was in deep, profound grief, they literally sat in ashes.
Like physical ashes from a fire.
Yes, they threw dust on their heads. They wore rough, scratchy sackcloth.
Yeah.
It was a physical, public manifestation of absolute devastation.
Right.
And the time of trouble we are investigating is universally described in Scripture as a time of unprecedented global mourning, terror, and apocalyptic loss.
Wow.
The ashes are going to be very, very real.
Right, the metaphorical and the literal ashes.
Exactly. Yet Isaiah says God provides the oil of joy for mourning. Notice it doesn't say instead of mourning.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He doesn't magically erase the circumstances causing the mourning. And he doesn't wait until years later when the mourning is completely forgotten. He provides the joy right there in the exact same moment, in the midst of the ashes.
It's a complete paradox. You are standing in the literal or metaphorical ashes of your life. The things you built, the security you relied on, it has all just burned down to the ground. And God walks up and hands you joy.
Yeah.
How does that even compute? Because my human brain says, I don't need joy right now, God. I need a fire extinguisher and a time machine to fix this.
And that is exactly where we hit a major breakthrough in the case file. If you were listening and taking notes, this is the defining principle you need to write down. Biblical joy is not the absence of trouble. It is the presence of God during the trouble.
Wait, say that one more time. That is huge.
Biblical joy is not the absence of trouble. It is the presence of God during the trouble.
That changes the entire trajectory of this investigation.
It has to, because human happiness strictly requires the absence of pain. You can't be happy while you're in agony. But biblical joy only requires the presence of God.
Wow.
That is the fundamental reason why it is durable enough to act as a survival essential. It is anchored to an unchanging, eternal God, rather than the shifting, terrifying circumstances of the world around you.
Okay, that makes sense intellectually. It shifts the paradigm. But I'll be completely honest with you. The Bible pushes this even further, almost to the point where it sounds deeply offensive to our modern sensibilities about trauma and mental health.
Oh, you're talking about James.
Yes, I am. Let's examine the directive given in the New Testament by James. It's in James chapter 1, verse 2. Listen to this. It reads, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations," or, as most modern translations phrase it, when you face various trials.
Yeah, that is a staggering, frankly shocking directive when you really think about it.
It really is. Think about what he is actually demanding of us there. Count it all joy when things fall apart. Like when you get the terrible medical diagnosis that changes your family's life forever.
Or when your bank account is drained.
Yes. Or when you are betrayed by your spouse.
Yep.
If a friend came to me in the middle of a massive life-shattering tragedy and I just looked at them and said, hey man, just count it all joy, That sounds exactly like toxic positivity.
It sounds completely insensitive.
It sounds like psychological gaslighting. Just denying the pain is real and slapping a fake plastic smile on a devastating, heartbreaking reality.
And if we look at the psychological profile of humanity, denial is an incredibly common defense mechanism.
Mm.
We often try to laugh away or minimize the things that utterly terrify us.
Right.
But if we extrapolate what James is actually arguing in the broader context of his letter, he isn't saying, force yourself to enjoy the suffering.
Okay.
He isn't promoting some sort of twisted spiritual masochism where you delight in being hurt. That would be pathological.
Yeah, that would be completely unhealthy.
The joy he is talking about is not based on the trial itself. You absolutely do not rejoice because you have cancer or because you lost your home to foreclosure. The joy is based on the deep, settled knowledge that God is actively doing something through the trial.
Okay, now this is where the mechanics of it get really interesting to me. You're saying the joy isn't ignoring the present misery, it's looking past it. It's heavily forward-looking.
Precisely. If you keep reading in James chapter 1, he immediately goes on to explain the why behind the command. He says that the testing of your faith produces patience or endurance, and ultimately it leads to a complete spiritual maturity where you lack nothing.
So there's an end goal.
Yes, Christian joy is the profound, anchored knowledge that suffering does not get the final word.
So it's sort of like reading a gripping, terrifying novel, but you've already flipped to the last page and read the ending.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. You are still actively reading the middle chapters. The characters you love are in peril, the situation is incredibly dark, and the tension is very real.
You still feel the stress of the story.
Exactly. But because you already know how the author concludes the story with absolute victory, you can endure the suspense of the middle chapters without completely panicking.
Right.
When you know the author and you know the ending is guaranteed, you can experience a deep, resonant joy, even while you are genuinely weeping in the present moment. The weeping is real, but the joy is the rock-solid foundation underneath it.
That requires an incredibly high level of spiritual intelligence, and honestly, it sounds beautiful in theory. But, theories have a nasty habit of completely falling apart when they are actually tested in the real-world courtroom of human history.
Oh, absolutely. They have to be stress tested.
Right. So if we need undeniable proof that this specific paradoxical type of joy can actually survive the ultimate crisis, we can't just rely on James's philosophical argument.
No, we need hard evidence.
We need a witness. We need someone who has been through the absolute worst, darkest, most agonizing, sanity-breaking crisis imaginable, and we need to verify if their joy actually held up under that immense pressure.
And if we are building a case that joy is the ultimate survival tool, we have only one logical move here.
What's that?
We have to call Jesus Christ to the stand.
Exactly. Jesus is the ultimate, unimpeachable witness in this entire investigation. Let's open the case file to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2. I have Pastor Myers' notes on this verse right here, and this is a massive turning point.
The fulcrum of the whole argument.
The text says, "Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame."
If you're listening to this right now, I want you to just pause whatever you're doing for a second and let the raw historical and theological weight of that single sentence sink in.
Yeah.
Who, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross. Jesus endured the most horrific physical, emotional, and spiritual trauma conceivable to the human mind.
It's almost impossible to fully grasp.
It is. The cross wasn't just a method of execution. It was a Roman instrument specifically designed for maximum public humiliation and psychological torture long before biological death even occurred.
Right.
He faced betrayal by his closest hand-picked friends. He faced a completely rigged, corrupt judicial system. He endured false accusations, public mockery, being stripped naked in front of a hostile crowd, beaten with a Roman flagrum until he was beyond physical recognition.
And then ultimately nailed to a piece of rough wood to slowly, agonizingly suffocate to death over a period of hours.
Yes. And yet, the writer of Hebrews states, as a matter of verified historical and spiritual record, that the internal mechanism of his endurance, the actual fuel that kept him going through all of that, was joy.
It is completely mind-bending when you really stop and look at it on the evidence board. The cross is the ultimate archetype of the time of trouble. It is the darkest human experience condensed into a single Friday afternoon. And the secret weapon that kept him on that cross, the thing that kept him from utilizing his divine power to just call down legions of angels and wipe out his tormentors, was joy.
It's staggering.
But this begs a massive glaring question for our investigation. What exactly was the joy set before him?
Now we're getting into motives.
Right. What could possibly be so incredibly valuable, so compellingly beautiful, that it mathematically outweighed the physical and spiritual agony of the crucifixion?
To answer that, we have to follow the paper trail carefully. We have to look at the prophetic clues scattered throughout the biblical record to reconstruct Jesus' internal motive leading up to the cross. We essentially have to figure out what was in his mind.
All right, let's track those clues down. In the notes, clue A is found in Psalm 16, verse 11. This is a prophetic psalm pointing directly to the Messiah's experience.
What does it say?
It says, "In thy presence is fullness of joy. At thy right hand there are pleasures forevermore." So clearly part of the joy was the anticipation of returning to the presence of the Father.
Correct. The restoration of that eternal, unbroken cosmic fellowship with God the Father that had existed before time even began.
Okay.
But that alone doesn't give us the complete picture. If we look at clue B, in Acts chapter 2, verse 28, Peter's actually preaching on the day of Pentecost, and he applies another specific prophecy to Jesus.
What does Peter say?
He says, "Thou hast made known to me the ways of life. Thou shalt make me full of joy with thy countenance." Again, the joy is explicitly, intimately linked to the presence and the very face of God.
But wait, this doesn't fully make sense to me.
Why not?
Because if the only goal was to get back to the Father, he never had to leave heaven in the first place.
Exactly.
Right. Why go through the unimaginable trauma of the cross just to get back to where you started? That just doesn't track logically.
Which brings us to Hebrews chapter 2, verse 10, gives us the missing piece of the motive. It talks about the overarching purpose of Christ's suffering, saying it became him in bringing, quote, many sons unto glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings.
Bringing many sons unto glory.
Yes. If we connect these pieces of evidence to the bigger picture, a stunning, absolute breakthrough emerges in our understanding of God. Jesus didn't just want to go back to heaven to escape the pain of earth.
Because he already had heaven.
Exactly. As you pointed out, he already possessed heaven before the incarnation. He didn't need to suffer a brutal Roman execution to experience the presence of the Father. He voluntarily left that infinite presence to come down into the dirt and blood of human history.
Right.
So the joy set before him wasn't merely a return to the divine status quo. He wanted us there with him. The joy that allowed Jesus to survive the trauma of the cross wasn't an abstract philosophical feeling. It wasn't just a geographic location of the cosmos. The joy was people.
Wait, no, hold on. Are you saying what I think you're saying?
I'm saying the evidence points to a reality that changes the entire paradigm of how we view our relationship with the Creator.
You're saying you and me, the people listening to this right now, we were the joy set before him.
Yes.
The prospect of bringing broken, rebellious humanity back from the brink of eternal destruction, the prospect of redeeming you, of standing with you in the glory of the Father, that was the specific, tangible joy that fueled his endurance.
That was the anchor.
When the iron nails were literally being driven through his wrists, the joy that he focused his mind on to survive that trauma was the vision of you being saved.
Which leads us to uncover a reality about the nature of God that is almost too immense, too staggering for the human mind to process.
It really is.
We're moving into the deep motive of this case now. How does God actually truly view humanity? Because if we are honest, most of us operate under this subconscious assumption that God is essentially a cosmic scorekeeper.
Oh, for sure. A giant auditor in the sky with a clipboard.
Right. We think that he mostly just tolerates us. That perhaps because of a legal loophole created by the cross, he begrudgingly forgives us, but he's still fundamentally irritated by our constant flaws and failures.
Yes. I think a lot of people picture God like this angry, exhausted high school principal looking at a constantly delinquent student over the top of his glasses, just, sighing heavily, shaking his head, and handing out demerits.
A very reluctant savior.
Exactly. But the evidence in the case file contradicts that entirely. Let's look at Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 17. The prophet writes, "The Lord thy God in the midst of thee is mighty. He will save. He will rejoice over thee with joy."
This raises such an important foundational point for this investigation.
Yeah.
God doesn't just put up with you. He doesn't just tolerate your existence because he has to.
He rejoices over you.
Yes. The creator of the cosmos, the architect of all physical reality, looks at redeemed humanity and experiences profound ecstatic joy.
That completely flips the script on how we understand our daily actions and our relationship with him. And it perfectly sets up the next piece of evidence, which is something that I think is often deeply tragically misunderstood in religious circles.
Let's hear it.
Let's examine Ephesians chapter 4, verse 30. It's a stark, serious warning. It says, "Grieve not the Holy Spirit of God, whereby ye are sealed unto the day of redemption."
This is a crucial verse. Usually when we hear the word grieve in a religious context, we instantly filter it through a lens of strict legalism.
Right.
We think grieving the Spirit means we broke a specific rule, we committed specific sin, and now God is angry, offended, and his arms are crossed. We treat it like a legal infraction against a judge.
We think of it exactly like a maximum security warden who is furious at an escaping prisoner. We think, oh, great, I broke the law, the cosmic cop pulled me over, he's writing me a ticket, and he is mad.
Exactly.
But Pastor Myers points out that if we redefine the English word grieve based on the original Greek language, the word is lupio, by the way, it doesn't mean to make angry.
No, it doesn't.
It literally means to cause distress, to cause deep sorrow, to make sad or heavy-hearted.
Which means this is not a cold legal term at all. It is a profoundly, intimately relational term.
So it's not a warden mad at an escaping prisoner. It is a parent weeping over a runaway child.
That is the perfect analogy for what is happening here. Think about it. When a teenager runs away from home and gets involved in a highly dangerous, destructive situation, the parent isn't pacing the floor angry because their parental authority was questioned or their house rules were broken.
Right. They aren't worried about the rules in that moment.
No. The parent is on the floor devastated. They're weeping because they know the child's walking blindly into destruction, and because the deeply cherished relationship has been severed, the sorrow is born out of love, not wounded pride.
And the opposite of joy is sorrow. If we, humanity, are the actual joy set before Christ, as we just discovered, then when we reject God's invitation, when we actively pull away from his grace and choose our own destructive path, we are literally causing heaven's sorrow.
We are breaking his heart.
We are grieving the Spirit because we are cutting ourselves off from the very source of life. And God, with his infinite knowledge, knows the end result is our absolute destruction. So when the Bible says, "Grieve not the Holy Spirit," it's not a threat.
Not at all.
It's not God shaking a lightning bolt saying, "Don't make me angry." It is pure, unfiltered love. It is God pleading, "Please don't break my heart by destroying yourself."
And when you realize that your salvation brings the God of the universe actual joy and your rebellion brings him actual sorrow, it completely transforms your core motive for obedience.
How so?
Well, you aren't trying to survive the time of trouble just to save your own skin out of terror anymore. You are standing firm because you refuse to surrender the joy that you bring to the heart of God. Your endurance becomes an act of love back to him.
Wow. That is profound. It moves everything from the courtroom to the living room.
Exactly.
And we see this exact relational dynamic play out historically in the life of King David. Let's look at David's alibi, his documented response to his own catastrophic moral and political failure.
Oh, this is a great case study.
After his horrific affair with Bathsheba, after orchestrating the murder of her husband, after months of a cold, calculated cover-up, the prophet Nathan finally confronts him. The kingdom is in jeopardy. David's life is literally on the line.
He's facing absolute ruin.
And he writes Psalm 51 in verses 10 through 12. He pleads with God. And listen closely to what he asks for. He says, "Restore unto me the joy of thy salvation."
What is so fascinating about analyzing David's psychological state here is what he does not ask for.
Right.
He is the king of a major ancient nation. He doesn't ask God to restore his political power. He doesn't ask to have his pristine public reputation magically fixed. He doesn't even explicitly focus on avoiding the intense divine punishment in that specific line.
He realized his greatest loss wasn't his crown. It wasn't the threat to his dynasty. It was the relational distance from God. The intimacy was gone. The joy was gone.
The spirit was grieved.
The heavy, crushing, suffocating weight of guilt had replaced the presence of the Spirit. He realized that surviving his own personal, self-inflicted time of trouble meant he desperately needed his joy back. He needed that vital connection to the Spirit way more than he needed his throne.
Which brings us to a critical, highly technical phase of our investigation today. The sealing.
Ah.
We've established what joy is, why it's necessary, how it relates to God's view of us. But how does this joy actually become a permanent, unshakable part of our spiritual DNA? How do we ensure it's actually there, locked in place, when the final global crisis hits?
Let's move the investigation to Revelation chapter 7, verses 1 through 3. The apocalyptic scene described here is incredibly intense. The text describes 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth.
And we know what those winds represent.
Right. In biblical prophecy, these winds universally represent global destruction, war, political chaos, and natural disaster. They are holding back the ultimate time of trouble. And another angel cries out with a loud voice, saying, "Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads."
Now, the concept of the seal of God is heavily debated in theological circles. But if we follow Pastor Myers' analysis, we have to look past the superficial science fiction interpretations.
Like the microchips.
Exactly. The seal is not a physical, literal barcode tattooed on your skin. It's not a subdermal microchip.
Yeah.
To understand the seal, you have to understand why it is placed specifically on the forehead.
Okay, biologically speaking.
Yes, neurologically speaking, the forehead houses the frontal lobe of the brain. This is the seat of all high-level executive function. It is where moral decision-making, character formation, emotional regulation, and personal identity physically reside.
So if God is placing his seal in the forehead, it means the seal represents a complete transformation of the mind by the Holy Spirit. It is the permanent neurological and spiritual embedding of those exact character traits we found earlier in Galatians 5:22. The seal is the love, the joy, the peace, fully formed, deeply grooved into the neural pathways, and spiritually settled into the character of the believer so that they absolutely cannot be moved by external pressure.
Exactly, and this raises an incredibly important psychological question regarding timing. A crisis of the magnitude described in Revelation 6, the complete collapse of society, does not create character. A crisis only exposes the character that has already been cultivated. Think of it like a sponge. If you squeeze a sponge, whatever liquid is already inside it is what comes out.
You don't get orange juice from a sponge soaked in water.
Exactly. If the time of trouble violently squeezes humanity with unprecedented, terrifying pressure, what comes out of a person is simply what was absorbed and developed during the times of relative peace.
So you can't wait until the winds of destruction are literally blowing the roof off your life to decide you suddenly need to develop joy. That's like trying to build a storm shelter while the tornado is already ripping through your front yard.
It's too late.
This joy must be developed now, today, in the mundane, annoying frustrations of daily life. When someone cuts you off in traffic, when your boss is unfair, that is where the seal is being formed.
Precisely. And this is where we have to look at the psychological profile of the enemy. Satan, in this context, is a master tactician. He understands human psychology better than we do.
Which is a scary thought.
It is. He knows he doesn't necessarily need to destroy your physical body to win the spiritual war. He just needs to destroy your ability to stand. He needs you to collapse spiritually. He needs you to give up.
And how does he execute that tactic? By systematically attacking your joy. If the joy of the Lord is literally your strength, your dunamai, as we established, then your joy is the primary military target.
Exactly. If the enemy can convince you that God has abandoned you, if you can use your physical suffering, your financial loss, or just the overwhelming chaos of the evening news to make you believe that heaven is silent, that God is an angry judge, and that you are entirely alone, he successfully neutralizes your strength.
He steals your joy.
He steals your joy. And when the joy is gone, the spiritual muscles atrophy rapidly and you fall.
That makes the stakes of our daily lives incredibly high. It means every single day is an active battlefield for your joy. Which brings us to the ultimate defense strategy outlined in the case file.
Let's hear it.
We find it in the Old Testament book of Nehemiah, chapter 8, verse 10. The historical context here is that the Israelites have just returned from exile. They are hearing the law of God read aloud for the first time in years, and they are weeping because they realize how far they've fallen.
They are deeply mourning their spiritual failure.
Right. But Nehemiah, the governor, tells them to stop mourning. He gives them a direct, authoritative command. The joy of the Lord is your strength.
It is a direct, irreducible causal equation. Joy equals strength. Without the joy, the strength ceases to exist.
Now, in the case file notes, Pastor Myers cross-references this with Jesus' own words in Matthew chapter 7, verse 24. This is the famous parable of the two builders.
Classic.
Jesus says, "Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man, which built his house upon a rock. And then the text says the rain descended, the floods came, the winds blew, which sounds exactly like the apocalyptic winds of the time of trouble we just discussed in Revelation.
The exact same imagery.
Yes, and they beat upon that house, and it fell not, because it was founded upon a rock.
The critical insight here is that the exact same storm hit both houses equally. The wise man wasn't spared from the wind or the rain.
He didn't get a pass.
No, the only difference between survival and total collapse was the foundation, the strength that was meticulously built before the storm ever arrived on the horizon. If you cannot hold on to the joy of the Lord during an ordinary Tuesday when your car breaks down, or when you face a petty conflict at work, you have built absolutely no foundation to survive the Category 5 hurricane of the final crisis. The strength you desperately need for tomorrow's apocalyptic storm must be systematically built today, in the quiet, mundane moments.
Okay, if you're tracking with us, the investigation is about to hit a major twist.
This is my favorite part of the notes.
Up until this point, we've been treating joy purely as a psychological and spiritual condition. We've defined it as an emotion, a spiritual state of mind, an internal mechanism of strength. But as we dig deeper into the sources provided by Pastor Myers, the textual evidence suggests we haven't been seeing the whole picture.
Not even close.
Joy isn't just an emotion you feel, it is actually a geographic, literal destination you arrive at.
This is where the biblical evidence forces us to radically expand our entire conceptual framework of what joy actually is.
Let's look at the evidence. Matthew chapter 25, verse 23. This is the famous parable of the talents, where the master returns from a long journey and commends his faithful servant.
What does the master say?
The master says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord."
We have to look incredibly closely at the specific verbs and prepositions used there. Enter thou into. You do not enter into a fleeting emotion.
No, you don't.
You enter into a room. You enter into a city.
Yeah.
You enter into a physical kingdom.
Right, you don't walk through a doorway into happy. The wording highly suggests a spatial realm. The kingdom of heaven itself, the very atmosphere and environment of eternity, is completely synonymous with the joy of the Lord. The destination you are traveling toward is joy.
And we can solidly corroborate this with earlier prophetic evidence from Isaiah chapter 51, verse 11. Isaiah paints an incredibly vivid, almost cinematic picture of this destination.
Oh, read that one.
He writes, "Therefore the redeemed of the Lord shall return, and come with singing unto Zion, and everlasting joy shall be upon their head. They shall obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and mourning shall flee away."
I want to linger on that phrase, flee away, because the imagery there is absolutely stunning to me.
It's incredibly powerful.
I want you to imagine sorrow as an apex predator. Right now, in this broken world we live in, sorrow is the ultimate apex predator that stalks every single human being on Earth. No one escapes it.
No one.
It is hunting you right now. Loss, disease, heartbreak, betrayal, the death of loved ones. They hunt us all down eventually, and they always catch us. But Isaiah is describing a future reality where the tables are completely, permanently turned. In this physical destination called joy, sorrow goes from being the predator to being the prey.
It is an active, violent repulsion of grief from the environment.
Yes, it literally runs away in terror. It's like a gazelle bolting from a lion. You couldn't catch sorrow in heaven, even if you laced up your shoes and chased it.
That's a great image.
The very atmosphere of God's physical presence is so fundamentally chemically incompatible with mourning that grief is violently expelled from the ecosystem. It cannot survive in that air. That is the actual place we are called to enter.
And if we connect this profound reality back to the larger investigation of surviving the time of trouble, it completely redefines the economics of our faith.
The economics.
Yes. Look at how Jesus describes this in Matthew chapter 13, verse 44. He says, "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto treasure hid in a field, the which when a man hath found, he hideth, and for joy thereof goeth and selleth all that he hath, and buyeth that field."
Oh, let's talk about the economics of joy. The man in the parable finds the treasure buried in the dirt. And notice what he doesn't do. He doesn't begrudgingly sell his possessions.
He is miserable about it.
Right. He doesn't complain to his wife about the immense cost of buying the field. The text specifically says he does it for joy. The prospect of true joy completely rewrites his entire definition of what constitutes a sacrifice.
That is a crucial psychological insight for endurance. In the context of the final time of trouble, believers will inevitably be asked to surrender everything. Their property, their societal security, their reputations, and perhaps even their physical lives.
Everything.
If they are operating on sheer human willpower and a sense of grim stoic duty, that massive level of sacrifice will absolutely break their minds. But if they have caught a true glimpse of the treasure, if they truly see the reality of the destination of joy, surrender completely changes.
It stops being a loss.
Exactly. It isn't about losing things anymore. It's about trading up. It is the joyful, calculated liquidation of temporary depreciating assets to secure an eternal, infinitely valuable reality.
So it's not a sacrifice at all. Let me give you an analogy. It's like someone walking up to you on the street and offering you a guaranteed multi-million-dollar winning lottery ticket, and all they ask in exchange is the half-eaten stale sandwich you are holding in your hand.
That's the perfect way to look at it.
You aren't sacrificing your lunch. You aren't weeping over the loss of the bread. You are happily, joyfully throwing it in the trash because you see the math. You see what you are getting in return. It's the ultimate insider trading. You know the market of this world is going to crash to absolute zero, so you joyfully divest to invest in the kingdom. It is brilliant.
It is brilliant, but as investigators, we still have to answer one lingering, highly practical objection here.
Okay, what's the objection?
Because if you were listening to this, you might be thinking, okay, I understand joy is a destination, and I understand joy is my spiritual strength, but I still live in the present reality where people can and do steal my happiness every single day.
That is very true.
How can a human being possibly possess a joy that survives the vicious, targeted attacks of the final global crisis?
We need to firmly establish that the joy we are talking about is fundamentally unstealable, and the primary evidence for that is found in the final words of Jesus himself before his crucifixion. Let's examine John chapter 15, verse 11.
Let's read it.
Jesus is speaking to his disciples, and he says, "These things have I spoken unto you, that my joy might remain in you, and that your joy might be full." And he follows this up a few moments later in John chapter 16, verse 22, making an absolute promise. "And ye now therefore have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your heart shall rejoice, and your joy no man taketh away from you."
I want to draw your attention to the specific pronoun Jesus uses in John 15. He says, that my joy might remain in you. He is not offering us a generic human version of joy.
He's not telling us to just cheer up.
No. He is not saying, I'm going to teach you a philosophy and I hope you figure out how to be happy. He is literally, spiritually injecting his own divine battle-tested joy into the believer.
It's a spiritual blood transfusion. It is the exact same joy that survived the trauma of the cross being placed directly into your veins. Let's think about the timeline of Christ's final hours as our definitive historical proof that this specific joy is bulletproof.
Let's look at the record.
Let's run through the case file of that night in Gethsemane in Jerusalem. First, he was betrayed by Judas, one of his closest confidants, with a kiss. A devastating, deeply personal, emotional blow. Did it steal his joy? No.
Then we read in Mark 14:50 that in the garden, all his disciples, the men he had poured his life into for 3 years, forsook him and fled into the dark. Utter, total abandonment in his hour of deepest, most desperate psychological need. Did that isolation steal his joy? No.
He was falsely imprisoned, as detailed in John 18:12. The religious elites and the political systems of Rome colluded to frame an innocent man. It was an absolute systemic miscarriage of justice. Did the injustice steal his joy? No.
He was mocked by the guards, spat upon in the face, beaten until his back was shredded, and finally crucified, nailed to a tree to die a slow, agonizing public death.
And yet, through every single escalating phase of trauma, physical pain, and emotional betrayal, he maintained the joy that was set before him.
And here is the core reason why. Because human happiness is tethered to circumstances, it can be stolen by circumstances. If a thief breaks into your house and takes your money, he successfully steals your financial happiness.
Right.
If a microscopic virus takes your health, it steals your physical happiness.
Yeah.
But if your joy is tethered completely to the eternal presence of God and the completed unbreakable work of Jesus Christ, no human dictator, no demonic force, and no global crisis can reach high enough to cut that cord.
It's untouchable.
It is mathematically, logically impossible for a man to take away what a man did not give in the first place.
Your joy no man taketh away from you. That is an ironclad divine guarantee. As we prepare to close this case file today, there is one final, stunning piece of evidence that ties this entire investigation together in a perfect bow.
I love this ending.
It is found at the very end of the New Testament, in Jude chapter 1, verse 24. It reads, "Now unto him that is able to keep you from falling, and to present you faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy."
The theological and literary symmetry here is just beautiful. We started this deep dive by looking at Hebrews 12, seeing Jesus enduring the horrors of the cross for the joy set before him. And we discovered that joy was you.
It was us.
And at the very end of the age, at the conclusion of the time of trouble, we see that exact same Jesus. And what is he doing? He is presenting his people, the survivors, the redeemed, who held on to his strength, to the Father in heaven. And he's doing it with exceeding joy.
This same Jesus who suffered in the absolute darkness of Golgotha to save you is the one standing in the blazing eternal light of glory, presenting you to the universe, absolutely bursting with exceeding joy. God's joy becomes our joy. The circuit is entirely beautifully completed. The exact joy that strengthened him to save us becomes the exact joy that strengthens us to stand with him when the world falls apart.
It is a profound, unbreakable loop of divine strength and relational love. That is exactly why joy isn't a luxury. That is why it is the second absolute essential for the time of trouble. It is the only force strong enough to counter the sheer, crushing weight of global apocalyptic sorrow.
If the joy of the Lord is your strength, and you, standing redeemed, are the joy of the Lord, then heaven is entirely, completely invested in your survival. The next time you face a crisis in your own life, the next time the winds blow and you feel your internal strength fading, ask yourself this. Are you exhausting yourself trying to manufacture your own temporary happiness out of broken circumstances? Or are you resting in the unshakable fact that you are the joy that kept Jesus on the cross?
That's the ultimate question. Thank you for joining us on this investigation today. If this case file cracked something open in your own understanding today, don't let it stop here. We want to explicitly invite you to subscribe to this podcast and share this episode with someone in your life who needs to hear this specific message.
Please do.
And for more Bible-centered content, profound studies into Scripture, and full sermons from Pastor Ivor Myers, you need to visit the Living Manna Online Church YouTube channel.
There is always more evidence to uncover if you know where to look.
Keep searching the Scriptures, keep following the clues, and keep looking for the truths that have been hiding in plain sight. Until next time, we'll see you on the next episode of Cracked Wide Open.